Welcome to English as a Second Language podcast number 9, Making and Eating Dinner. This is English as a Second Language podcast, episode number 9. I'm your host, Dr. Jeff McQuillan, coming to you from the Center for Educational Development in beautiful Los Angeles, California. In this episode, I'll talk about making and eating dinner. I especially like the eating part. Let's get started. When I get home, I start on dinner right away. I clean off the kitchen counter after putting away the groceries and decide to make pasta. I preheat the oven to 375 to bake the bread and to keep the chicken hot until my wife gets home. I put some water in a pan and turn the burner on high. When the water starts boiling, I put in the pasta and decide to make a salad. Just then, my wife opens the back door and yells, "I'm home." She comes into the kitchen and helps with chopping the tomatoes to add to the sauce. She stirs the sauce until it's done, while I finish tossing the salad. I get out the placemats and napkins to set the table. I also make sure that there is a spoon, knife, fork, and plate for each of us. About 15 minutes later, we sit down at the table in the dining room and talk about our long day. My wife says she'll do the dishes since I cooked, but of course, I help out by drying them. First, I put some of the leftovers in a Tupperware container and some in plastic wrap, and the rest in aluminum foil. Then I dry the pans, plates, glasses, and silverware. In this episode, we are making dinner at the beginning. When I get home, I start on dinner right away. Once again, we have one of those two-word verbs in English. I start on dinner. That means I begin to prepare dinner. So I start on dinner right away. I clean off the kitchen counter after putting away the groceries. The kitchen counter, C-O-U-N-T-E-R, is the place in your kitchen where you have a long, flat top or board where you can prepare food and you can put things on. It's like a table almost. But usually in a kitchen, you have cabinets or cupboards where you store things, and on top, you have a counter. A counter is a general word that refers to the top of something, usually somewhere where you do something on top of it. In this case, the kitchen counter is where you prepare food. Well, I clean off the kitchen counter after I put away the groceries. The groceries, Groceries, plural, are the food that I buy at the market. We sometimes call a supermarket a grocery store, a place where you buy groceries, buy food that you bring home and prepare and eat at home. I decided to make pasta, so I preheat the oven to 375. To preheat, P-R-E-H-E-A-T, really means the same here as to heat. But if you look at the instructions for making food, what we would call the recipe, R-E-C-I-P-E, the recipe for making food, usually it begins, if you are going to be cooking something in the oven, by telling you to preheat the oven. That just means to turn it on so that when you are ready, when it is hot, you can put the food in to cook. P-R-E, means before or to do something before. So I preheat the oven to 375. In other words, 375 degrees Fahrenheit. I preheat it because I want to bake the bread and keep the chicken hot until my wife gets home. To bake, B-A-K-E, is to cook something usually in an oven. So I open the oven door, I put in the bread, I put in the chicken, and then I close the door. My wife is going to be home late, so I want to keep the chicken hot. I want to make sure that it stays hot. I put some water in a pan. A pan is what you use to cook something in. So I put some water in a pan and I turned the burner on high. The burner, B-U-R-N-E-R, is on top of what we would call your stove, S-T-O-V-E. Your burners are for cooking food where you have the heat comes from the bottom and you put the pan on top of the heat. So if you are going to boil some water, make the water hot, you would put it in the pan and then put it on top of a burner. And the burner is part of your stove. Usually, stoves and ovens are one machine, one single piece in many American kitchens. In my kitchen, the stove is on top of the oven. I am going to boil some water. To boil, B-O-I-L, means to make the water very hot until you start to see bubbles. The average temperature is 212 degrees Fahrenheit or 100 degrees Celsius in order to boil water. Well, when the water starts boiling, when it starts to make bubbles because it is very hot, I put in the pasta. I take the pasta noodles, N-O-O-D-L-E-S, the little pieces of pasta, we call those noodles, and I put them into the boiling water so they can cook. Then I decide I want to make a salad because I'm very hungry. Well, just as I decide to make the salad, just then, my wife opens the back door. Just then, that expression means at that time, at that same time. My wife opens the back door, the door to the house in the back. The opposite would be the front door. She yells, "I'm home." That's what you would say when you come home to someone who is already there. You would say, "I'm home." You wouldn't say, "I've arrived," or "I'm here." You would say, "I'm home." My wife comes into the kitchen and helps me chop the tomatoes. To chop, C-H-O-P, means to cut something into small pieces. We chop tomatoes, we make them into smaller pieces, and we add them to the pasta sauce. That's the red liquid that we're going to put over the pasta. My wife stirs the sauce until it's done. To stir, S-T-I-R, when you are cooking, means to take a spoon and put it into the pan and move the spoon back and forth so that you are mixing what is in the pan. So my wife is stirring the sauce, the pasta sauce, the tomato sauce, until it's done, until it is ready, until it is cooked. While I finish tossing the salad.